we're ready to go ahead.
Okay.
And Chris will make some brief opening remarks.
I think I'm ready too. Wow.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
And then Jamal will introduce you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Federal Communications Commission's second in a series of presentations and discussions on accessibility and innovation as part of the FCC's Accessibility and Innovation Initiative. By way of background, the FCC's A&I initiative was launched in 2010 at the 20th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act to implement a recommendation in the National Broadband Plan. The mission of the A&I initiative is to promote collaborative problem solving on accessibility among academic, industry, consumer, and government sectors so that people with disabilities can reap the full benefit of broadband communications technologies. The A&I initiative represents a non-regulatory approach to promoting accessibility, which complements the regulatory efforts of the Commission in this area. The Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau commenced the A&I Speaker Series in an effort to show how solutions to accessible technology problems can be realized more quickly and broadly in society. Today, we are fortunate to have an individual with an impressive record as both a researcher and an entrepreneur as our keynote speaker, Dr. Yevgen Borodin. Dr. Borodin works at the cutting edge of innovation in accessible technologies. Among other things, he has an app that everyone can get from the iTunes App Store. In a moment, I will turn the program over to our own Jamal Mazrui, who will kindly introduce Dr. Borodin. But at the outset, let me thank Dr. Borodin for so graciously agreeing to be with us today. We appreciate your willingness to share your time, your energy, and your enthusiasm with this topic with all of us. Before turning it over to Jamal, let me encourage you to take advantage of the full program we have for you today. We've allowed for plenty of time for Q&A after Dr. Borodin's presentation. I encourage you to engage with him. We also have professional networking opportunities over the lunch hour. And then finally, this afternoon, we'll have exciting demonstrations lined up in our Technology Experience Center down the hall. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jamal to make the formal introduction of our guest speaker. Jamal?
Hi, it's exciting to have Yevgen Borodin here with us today. As you may know, we began our speaker series this year on July 16 with Clayton Lewis. And the idea is to give us things to think about that can help reduce what I call the accessibility gap. That is the difference between when emerging technologies become popular and when they become accessible. So this is kind of, I'm not supposed to say TED Talk because that's a trademarked thing, but the idea is big ideas for us to think about and try to implement to reduce the accessibility gap. And with Clayton, he asked us to think about how application programming interfaces can be used so that the underlying content on the web can be made available in different presentations by use of those APIs and customized user interfaces for particular disability groups. He also encouraged that people with disabilities be empowered as much as possible to become developers and producers of apps and content, not just consumers. Yevgen also brings some big ideas today, and I hope we can give them our full attention. The demos in the Technology Experience Center also tried to illustrate some of those ideas. For example, how a smartphone can scan scan printed material into electronic text, or how a web browsing assistant can extract news articles and create a playlist for later reading, and how cloud computing can help to enhance accessibility for all through auto-personalization of user interfaces. Eugene is originally from Ukraine, though his studies have been in the United States. He has been at the top of his class in those studies, receiving recognition from the president of Stony Brook University in 2010 for his dissertation about bridging the web accessibility divide. He has written over 30 scholastic papers, received over $4 million in federal research grants, and truly works on the cutting edge of accessible innovation, trying to implement ideas as well as research them. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Yevgen Borodin. Please join me in welcoming him.
Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? The mic seems to be on. Is it? Is it fine? Okay. Thanks for having me here today. It's a great pleasure and honor, especially considering that the first speaker was Clayton Lewis. So let me start with a few words about myself. I'm sort of a professor. Is it still?
Okay. Just to be closer to you. There you go.
There we go. So I'm sort of a professor. I do have students. I guest lecture occasionally, but I don't really teach classes. I'm sort of a businessman. I do have a company, but I haven't really made a fortune yet. But I do dare call myself a computer scientist and a researcher, and as you know, researchers need money. So you can imagine that my relatively short research career, I have written a fair number of successful research proposals. And since I wanted this talk to succeed as well, I decided to structure it just like a research proposal. And that makes you, the audience, my review panel. And I hope you'll be a favorable review panel. But today I'm not here to ask for the money. I would like to challenge your way of thinking and maybe even spur your interaction. So I'm not sure if you will agree with my ideas, but at least by the end of the talk, you will have learned how to successfully structure a research proposal. So let's start. Improving accessibility for the general public. What do I mean by that? Let's start in the beginning. This is the solution, but we need to get to it first. So any good proposal should start with a problem statement. And I'm sorry, I do have a lot of images in my presentation, but I do try to make them as accessible as possible. So here I have a hammer hitting a nail into a wooden board, and the nail wouldn't go in. It twisted in the letter S, and I used that as a first letter of the word statement in general problem statement. So the problem statement is that the few technologies are developed to be universally accessible. So a lesson to learn is whenever you define the term, you should use the term, you should define it. So there are many definitions of universal accessibility, and this is the one I like the most. So technology could be called universally accessible if it is usable to the maximum extent possible by everyone regardless of their age, ability, or circumstance. And that means anywhere, anyone, by anyone, at any time. So the next step is if you define the term, you should then illustrate it, because a dry definition doesn't make it. So when people think about universal accessibility, the first thing that usually comes to mind is a curb cut. Curb cut makes sidewalks accessible to people in wheelchairs, bicycles, strollers, roller bags, anything else that has wheels. So this is not technology, you say, but the same principles should apply to technology as well. I guess this one is not one of the universally accessible technologies. It's universally inaccessible. In this picture, I have a vending machine where the bag of sun chips, the frontmost bag, is missing. So you actually have to pay twice to get the one bag. So this technology is universally inaccessible. So incidentally, my friend who is blind was using one of these machines in our office building, and he would often donate money in this situation, or if the product was out of stock, or if it gets reshelved, so he would get the random I'm feeling lucky product. So just a few weeks, he was pleasantly surprised when the machine was upgraded. Did they fix the problem? Not really. The machine is still very happy to accept his donations. It also accepts credit cards now. I guess that's by design. And that's not it. They also upgraded this ugly-looking old plastic buttons with this beautiful and shiny and completely inaccessible touchscreen. So I guess they did solve the problem in some way. He no longer donates money to the machine. He brings his own snacks to work with him. Need I say more? All right, I will. So let's expand on the problem. The technology is advancing very, very rapidly. In fact, so rapidly that the designers and innovators don't take the time or they don't care to make the technology accessible. And when somebody finally does, it usually is an afterthought. And at that point, all we have left to do is retrofit. So what's wrong with retrofitting? Other than the fact that it's kind of late? Well, it sometimes works. Actually, the curb cut, again, it wasn't there all the time. It was enacted by ADA in 1990. And at that time, we already had sidewalks, so they had to retrofit. And sometimes it doesn't. So here I have a beautiful picture, actually 4 pictures of the first curb cut that is too narrow for a wheelchair, too steep, and it actually is raised above the ground, so you could the wheelchair can get stuck and flip over. Another curb cut with a pole right in the middle, no way to go around it. A curb cut leading to a lawn, and a curb cut leading to a highway divider. Speak about accessibility barriers. And sometimes it really doesn't work. Here I have a cartoon displaying a fully accessible polling station with a very steep staircase that was retrofitted with 2 wooden boards that were not even attached to the staircase, and 3 people standing in the bottom, one in a wheelchair, one with a cane, and one who definitely has no problem getting up the stairs. And he says, that's the trouble with you people. Even when we give you what you ask for, it's still not enough. And that's the going attitude for requests to retrofit some technology. But more often, the retrofitting sort of works. And here again, our curb cut. It's not quite universally accessible. Once you install a curb cut, unless the curb cut, the slope declines very steep, so you would fall over when you walk into it, a blind person with a cane would no longer know that the sidewalk ends, and he could get run over by traffic. So it's actually dangerous. And he thought it was universally accessible. So somebody realized that you could further retrofit a curb cut with by installing a plastic mat with truncated domes. It's like bumps. And if a blind person walks with a cane, the cane hits the bumps, and the person knows that should take the precautions, and the road is near. And these were recommended by Americans with Disabilities Act accessibility guidelines since 2001. And here's the curb cut again. Because the domes were not in the initial design, as you can see here, there are no truncated domes here. They were not installed everywhere at the same time. And so you can't really count on them being there, so you still have to be very careful if you can't see it. Actually, you see the painting on the sides of the curb cut is also added for people with low vision, so they can see that the curb cut is there. So you're going to get really tired of seeing this curb cut again and again. So as retrofitting often goes, the materials that were used to produce those truncated domes, pads, were not very durable, so they wore out very quickly in many cases. And here I have a picture with the truncated domes almost gone. I think maybe too much foot traffic or snow plows, and that's another problem with snow plowers. So in some cities in the United States, they even discontinued the use of truncated domes. Furthermore, although there have been official reports of people in wheelchairs having no problem going over the truncated domes, at the same time, the end users reporting trouble with the front wheels of wheelchairs getting stuck in the truncated domes. Sometimes people even fall, and the bumps can also trigger the muscle spasms for people with certain types of spinal cord injuries. So, and truncated domes can also cause some trouble with navigation for people in inline skaters. Not that we like those, but so yeah. I don't know about technology, but you'll learn definitely a lot about curb cuts today. And this is what I think retrofitting is all about. It's duct tape. It sort of works. It's ugly. It causes inconveniences. It's also late. It doesn't quite fix it for one group of people, and it often breaks it for another group of people. And it can also be expensive. These pads, the truncated dome pads, they go for at least $100 a piece. So curb cuts, truncated domes, duct tapes, it's hardly a technology, as you say. So yeah, but these are very illustrative. The retrofitting technology is a little more subtle, and it's a lot less visual, so it wouldn't be as exciting. But I really can't wait to see what they're going to do with that vending machine. Maybe put lots of duct tape on it. So the current state of affairs. While curb cuts are not really changing very fast, the technology is advancing very rapidly. If we cannot keep track with curb cuts, we can only imagine what's happening with technology. We're first developing accessible technology, then we're retrofitting it, and before we're even done retrofitting it, some new technology comes out. So it's just a vicious circle. And we're continuously chasing the moving target, as I show in this picture. So I also promised to talk about technology. So I'm going to fall back here in my experience in web accessibility, and I'll give you a very brief, but by no means complete overview of the state of the art in web accessibility and how we've been chasing the moving target in this field. So first, there was just the text mode. The browsers were text-based, computers were text-based, and it was fairly simple. Web pages were simple. The screen reader was reading the screen directly, and it wasn't very usable for everyone, but it was fine. And here I have a Lynx browser. There are still text browsers. Lynx browser on Linux that shows the Google web page. So the browsing was very simple. And then we decided we want to add pictures, animation, graphics. So graphical web browsers came out. In 1993, Mosaic browser was the first popular browser. And with the introduction of graphics, the screen readers could no longer read the content of a screen directly. They had to work with the operating system, intercept the messages, the rendering messages to know what it is that we want to display on the screen. So that took us a while to implement. And then we also added pictures. With the pictures, people started using pictures for anything, for buttons, for links, for menus. And they were forgetting to add alternative text, making pictures inaccessible, or they would add meaningless text like ALT or image, and you would listen to a menu that says image, 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 or they would add unnecessary text for something that is not even visible on the screen, some kind of dividers, white space, and you would hear divider or spacer. So far, this image accessibility has been a major problem, and it still is, and there's nothing screen readers can do about it. They can just try to ignore some of the small images and use different heuristics like that, retrofitting. And then HTML kept evolving, and around 1996, HTML3 came up with frames. And here I have a Netscape browser with 3 nested frames. If you click a link in the left frame, the picture reloads in the right frame, and each frame can have its own web page open at the same time. Then it took screen readers to deal with that for a while. And then in mid-90s, we invented dynamic HTML, and all sort of problems started to appear. The typical approaches for dynamic content were automated page reload when the entire page reloads, server-side scripting, and client-side scripting is just some code that modifies the page. So the automated page reload, you're reading something on a web page, and all of a sudden it refreshes. If you're reading it with a screen reader, the screen reader would invariably start from the top of the page. And some content would get inserted, some content would get deleted, and you wouldn't know what happened. Screen readers quickly did disable that refresh mode, so we'll just ignore it. Here's another example of server-side scripting, specifically form submission error. You fill out the form, you hit submit, the page reloads. This was implemented using server-side scripting. Then there's some error message showing that you didn't enter the password correctly. And again, the screen reader starts at the top of the page, and then the blind person using a screen reader has to look all around for that message that the sighted person can see in a fraction of a second. Screen readers still don't deal with this. Dynamic widgets, some stuff that changes on the web page. Let's say typical reservation form. You click on the leaving and returning dates, and you get this dynamic calendar. Very convenient for sighted people, unusable for blind people, because they don't know where it is. So dynamic content caused all kind of grief to screen reader users. People don't know where is stuff appearing, when it is appearing, what to do with it, how to find it. They lose reading position as it appears or disappears. And this is still an unsolved problem in many cases. It took screen readers several years to just show the content, update its internal representation as the content changes on the web page. So in the meanwhile, screen reader users are still avoiding dynamic web pages, and they're using all their sort of secondary versions of Facebook, of Gmail, that are much simpler and usually lag behind in functionality behind the mainstream versions of those web pages. CAPTCHAs, it's an acronym. It's a completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart. It was invented in 2000. And Turing tests usually test whether a computer can fool a person about being not being a computer. So CAPTCHAs were created to prevent spammers from registering for accounts and then abusing those accounts. But they also became a huge problem for people who use screen readers, because they could no longer register and log in into websites without assistance of a sighted person. So spammers were not very happy about that either, and they were also very interested in cracking those. So different attempts have been made to provide simple solutions for CAPTCHAs, but those were, let's say, math problems, but those were either too simple or too complicated. Now there are some services that help decipher CAPTCHAs. They're powered by human users. And there are some other CAPTCHAs, such as this reCAPTCHA, that includes a very difficult to hear audio, difficult to understand. So you have to have good hearing to get that. It's not so much of a problem, but not everybody's using these. Oh, yes, thank you very much. Videos. Everybody knows YouTube. That's where most of the videos are these days, but there are other services too. Here I have a playful cat in the video. The video content is created inaccessible by the content providers, by people. And the content is inaccessible to people who are blind because there's no description of what's in the video. And the content is inaccessible to people who are deaf because they can't hear what's in the video. So I think YouTube now provides automated captioning. They use the speech recognition technology. It's better than nothing, but still far from perfect. Flash, we still don't quite know what to do with this. If it wasn't accessible from the very beginning, if it wasn't made accessible, to make it accessible, you pretty much have to hack it because it's proprietary technology. I believe YouTube is still using Flash Player, depending on the format of the video that you upload. And for screen reader users, it's not as usable as other technology. Here, HTML5 comes to the rescue. It's the next generation of HTML. This was actually designed with accessibility in mind, but it still has some unresolved issues. In HTML5, videos in YouTube are a lot more accessible. But the work on HTML5 started in 2004, and it is scheduled to complete in 2014. And it's already used to some extent by some browsers. And the problem is it has to be adopted first by the browsers, then it has to be adopted by the web developers who create web pages for those browsers. And then the screen readers also have to adopt this technology. And who's going to take care of the web pages that are already out there and not developed with HTML5? Furthermore, history shows that developers will definitely find a way to develop, to create web pages inaccessible even with HTML5. So what's the current state of web accessibility? Many websites are mostly accessible, the major websites, but there's still a lot of inaccessible content. And the general trend that with every new introduction of technology, it didn't take into consideration people with disabilities, and especially screen reader users, and it caused major accessibility problems. So they were later fixed by retrofitting, or still haven't been fixed to this day. And retrofitting, the specifications did not really consider accessibility in the beginning, and then we have to update the specifications, retrofit them. Content was not developed accessible, so now we need to retrofit the content. And the screen reading technology itself is retrofitting, if you think about it, because it wasn't in the initial design of the web browsers or the operating system, so it's some third party providing technology to retrofit inaccessible computers. So there's several levels of it. In the meantime, the content continues to be becoming more graphical. Applications, the websites are turning into dynamic applications, and my prediction that the trend will continue. And there's one more thing. When people think about accessibility, screen reading accessibility, they think about the content being navigable with a screen reader. And really, accessibility does not imply usability. There's a significant disparity in the efficiency of web access by people who are sighted and people who are screen reader users. I had a simple user study fail recently because we did the pilots with students who were screen reader users, and they were pretty efficient. And then our actual subjects were, on average, 50 years old. So a simple task, such as find the content in a web page, the article content, would take them 5 to 10 minutes, and they would just exceed, our time limits for each of those tasks. The most efficient power user who can do stuff, who can buy on Amazon, could complete the purchase in 1 minute. I can do it in 10 seconds. And in a user study, we saw people doing this in 10 to 15 minutes. There's so much difference. So, if you improve accessibility by retrofitting, what you end up with is stuff being accessible, not usable. So finally, at the end of any good introduction, you need to say, who cares about this? Why should anyone care? What's the broader impact? And I suppose we all care because we're here, but how about others? Why should they care? So let's look at the statistics. There are 246 million people with low vision worldwide. There are 39 million people without sight worldwide. 21.5 million Americans have significant vision loss. 36 million Americans with at least one disability, and that's 12% of the population. And worldwide, there are different estimates, but let's say about 650 million with disabilities worldwide. That's 9%. The percentage is lower worldwide because people probably don't live as long in developing countries, and countries also evaluate disability differently, so they have different metrics. There's also aging population. There's 40 million, 13% of population that is over 65 in the United States in 2009. And the estimate will be 19%, 72 million people in the United States by 2030. Worldwide, we have 605 million people who are over 60 years old. That was in 2000. And the estimate by 2050 will be 2 billion people. And aging population is going to lead to more people developing disabilities as people live longer. And that's pretty much, could be any one of us. So to summarize, and it's a very good thing to summarize your introduction in the proposal, the main points: we need technology to be accessible, and we need it to be accessible now, yesterday actually, because many of us are likely to benefit from this technology in the not so distant future. Retrofitting is not the best approach. Why? Because it's expensive, it's late, and it doesn't really solve the problem. So what's a good approach? The answer is pretty simple, obvious. Accessibility has to be included in the design, at the design stage of the technology. Is this a new concept? No, it isn't. But the most innovators are still not doing it. So why is this? Is there a way for us to encourage them? So let's look at the state of the art in encouraging people to include accessibility in the design. So this will be our related work section. accessibility in the design. Of course, we need to teach accessible design in schools. We are doing it to some extent, but not very well. It's not a mandatory class. It's not taught everywhere. There's definitely space for improvement here. But some people, they don't go to schools, or they're already done with schools. And really, technology changes all the time, so it has to be people have to self-educate themselves. So for that, we have guidelines. Here, if you scary acronyms just for the Web Accessibility Guidelines: CAG, UAG, YARIA, ATAG. There's a lot of guidelines, and I have to admit, even I haven't read all of them. They're long. So designers haven't read them either. So then we're creating different tools and frameworks that would implement those guidelines and help designers automate the procedures. And those help a lot, but somebody needs to read the guidelines to create these tools, and not all toolkits actually implement the guidelines. And research shows the web developers haven't really followed the guidelines, and many innovations actually are beyond the guidelines. The guidelines don't cover the future technology. So the next thing we're creating are regulations to force the innovators to implement the guidelines. And we have Rehabilitation Act, we have the ADA, the 21st Century Video Accessibility Act, and these help a lot, but also to a limited extent. So I don't want to diminish the importance of these efforts. They have to continue, but these are not enough. So what can we do better? Can we create more guidelines? Well, there are already too many guidelines for an average developer to keep track of. Should we create more regulations? But how many of them are enforceable? We can mandate the government websites to be accessible, the corporations, but can we force individuals to create videos that are accessible or provide alternative text to images, the stuff that they share on Facebook? I don't think so. And even if we do, that's still retrofitting, and there will be a problem of accessibility versus usability. People will do the minimum amount required to make their stuff accessible. Can we pump more money into retrofitting? Maybe. We're putting a lot in it already. And there's a whole industry built around this. The government is spending a lot of money on just subsidizing this industry. So why isn't innovation included in the design stage in the first place? So let's consider the life cycle of innovation. Innovation is usually motivated by a single need. Then we build a prototype around that need to address it, obtain funding during, before the prototype development, develop and ship a minimum viable product. We hurry to do this, push it to the market, and then we have to maintain the product to stay ahead of the competition. And finally, we'll either sell off the assets or disband the operation or continue growing the company. And there are many pressures along the way. For example, trying to make technology accessible. There's so many disabilities to consider. There's not enough expertise in the company to do this. This is expensive. There are financial constraints. You never have enough funding. And there's time to market pressure. There's one big group that you can cover now, and there are lots of smaller groups that you can provide for later. Yes, there are 10 to 15% of the population with disabilities, but they're then further split into different subgroups. So realistically, no matter how many people that is, the market forces are gonna dictate addressing the biggest market, the general population. And the remaining niche markets are then open for the assistive technology companies who have significantly less funding, and the products are already developed, so we're retrofitting. An interesting example is the video accessibility. Videos are actually becoming more accessible these days. And why is that? Is this because people suddenly started caring about people with disabilities? To some extent, there are many reasons for this, but I think my claim is the main reason is because the content providers and people who host the content, they want the content to be searchable. There's too many videos, they need to index them. So now they are interested in making the videos accessible. And from there, there's only a small step to make the videos accessible for people with vision impairments and hearing impairments. So it's not a big step, so they do it. And they claim that they do this to improve the accessibility. So to summarize, the most innovations will target the general population. There's no reason for this to change. The guidelines, the regulations will help, but they will not fix the problem. We can try to mandate so every inventor runs the innovation by the committee first, but we'll stifle the innovation this way, and other companies will out-innovate us in a year. The innovations will not be designed accessible, and then the assistive technology industry will continue to retrofit. It's a vicious cycle. Unless we align the general and assistive market needs, just like what happened with accessibility of videos. So finally, we got to the proposed work section. And my proposal is fairly simple. Let's align the needs of the general and the assistive technology markets. Easier said than done, right? Well, I don't promise it was going to be easy. And how do we do this? Let's consider an example. Let's fall back again to non-visual browsing. It's my area of expertise. So with developers, when they created the screen readers, they focused on the needs of people who are blind. So then they made some design decisions that sort of fit the development of technology to fulfill those needs. In the meanwhile, the technology became unusable to sighted people. Sighted people are not listening to the web because the technology is not usable, and there's very little pressure on the content providers to make the websites accessible. Have you tried to browse the web with a screen reader lately? If you have, I think it was because you had to, not because you wanted to. You may say that screen readers were designed this way because otherwise they would be not accessible to blind people. But I have my doubts about that. But even if that was true, my claim that going from screen reading that is accessible to sighted people, from that screen reading to screen reading that is accessible to blind people, is just a very small step. It would be just as small as providing video captioning, is my previous example. So if the general market needs to be aligning, it's not going to align with us. We have to align with the general market. We should align our technology with the general market. And here we come to the challenge. So my challenge to you is, instead of adapting the general public technology that is already developed to be accessible for people with disabilities, let's make the assistive technology that we already have accessible to the general market. Instead of waiting for the general market players who often don't care or don't understand disabilities, the needs of people with disabilities, we, the players in the assistive technology market, should find a way to make our assistive technology accessible to people in the general market. And this is called positioning. Let's look at the positioning in the screen reading. Technology for blind people is unusable to sighted people. The content providers have no inherent motivation to make their content accessible. Funding is very limited for assistive technology. The government provides funding, subsidizes. Blind people are a small population and not very rich. Then the developers who could create the assistive technology, they want money as well, and they won't have big impact. So you end up with people who are very dedicated because they have somebody in their family who has a disability, or they just move on because the assistive technology market, they can't pay exuberant prices for really good developers. And then finally, the product pricing has to be subsidized or has to be exuberant. And some screen readers cost $1,000 a copy. That's like selling a Ferrari. And if you change the focus, what's going to happen? If you give sighted people an easy way to browse the web, the content providers will be forced to adapt their content for listening because sighted people will complain. There's a lot of them. They will complain the content is not accessible. VCs and angels will see big market potentials that will invest. Developers will see the potential, the big impact projects, that they will be paid well as well. So there'll be more developers who are talented to develop the technology. And then prices will be low because you can build this economy of scale. And everybody's going to benefit. The web is going to be accessible to everybody. So if we don't do this, then we will remain small-time assistive technology companies chasing the moving target, making the living, making the ends meet. Yes, there's always risk to lose focus on accessibility, especially if you if you have assistive technology, you convert it then to be accessible to sighted people, and then there will be a series of acquisitions probably, and in the end, the acquirers won't care as much. They won't have the same motivation as the initial developers. But as I will show next, that's still a small step. The technology that we will have will be still a lot easier to make accessible. So the next important question is this feasible? Can this be done? Let's see. There were actually some historical examples of technology that was initially developed for people with disabilities, and then it became mainstream. Optical character recognition. The first patents of the devices that could recognize characters were filed in 1809, and those were motivated by people with disabilities, with vision impairments. Then, however, they were mostly motivated by telegraph, and the technology kept developing. Then in 1976, Kurzweil reader was developed to help blind people. But then the mainstream noticed the technology and they acquired it. There were a series of acquisitions. I think Xerox owned it for a while, and then finally I think it's owned by Nuance. So OCR is now used by the general market. It's so much better than it initially was because there's a lot more money in this. And then the OCR is also used in a multitude of assistive technology devices. And this one is a little closer to FCC. Everybody knows that Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, although there's been some controversy about this. But very few people know that he developed it while he was trying to teach deaf people to speak. He was trying to visualize the audio so people can get some feedback and adjust the way they pronounce the words. But he invented the telephone, and did this really help people who were deaf? Well, let's see. Well, once you have the telephone, the next technology was developed, the teletype writer, TTY, and one eventually led to another. In 1960, there were teletype writers. Little piece of history, actually, AT&T didn't want to implement TTY, and claiming it would damage their infrastructure. But the FCC mandated that AT&T should develop the TTY, and they did, and it was fine. And now we have chat messages now. Sort of one technology goes after another one, and maybe some of you are chatting at this moment. Finally, there are video phones. There were different prototypes. The most notable one I have on the left was developed by AT&T, was showcased in 1964. And now we have iPhones with FaceTime and other similar applications on other platforms, and people can communicate via sign language. So this is the phone. If we didn't have the original phone, we wouldn't have this phone either. Everybody knows Segway, but few people know that the first device to develop using this technology was actually a wheelchair. It was called iBot. It was a stair climbing wheelchair. Unfortunately, again, acquisitions, the device is no longer sold. People thought it would be more profitable to develop Segway. But then the next thing you see other people adapting the Segway, retrofitting it to be used as a wheelchair. So again, there was a loss of focus, but other people pick up the torch and they keep moving the accessibility forward. And now we have Segway GM Puma prototype that is very close. This is for urban driving. It's very close to being a universally accessible wheelchair. And we already have office chairs with wheels. So I often cart around the office, just push myself. And I don't see why we couldn't develop motorized chairs, popularize them. And there will be no separate wheelchair in the office place, just a chair. And there are many other areas that could grow in a similar way. Interfaces controlled by voice commands. Personal assistant interfaces, including those which help you manage your time, location. Interfaces controlled by the power of thought. That would be very useful for people with motor impairments. Interfaces controlled by eye movements. Think about your computer. You just focus your eyes somewhere and it reacts. Object and face recognition technology similar to that is available in the Google Glasses and other technology that helps people who are blind recognize objects and faces around them. Interfaces with tactile feedback. Think about your phone you can feel the buttons on your phone. Prosthetics and exoskeletons, that would be extremely useful too. And a lot of this technology is already being developed, and it often starts with trying to address the assistive technology market. So any good proposal should also have measurable success criteria. How do we know if we succeeded in what we're doing? So here are a few success measures. We will see assistive technology companies growing in size. We'll see assistive technology companies being acquired because the mainstream would be very interested. Right now, mainstream doesn't really want to buy assistive technology companies. There's known accessibility evaluation metrics in web accessibility, for example, assistive technology checkers. They verify how accessible your website is. And we'll see the metrics improve there. Disability and employment claims would be dropping because people will be more mobile, they'll be more productive with assistive technology, and they could find jobs more easily. And then hopefully attitudes toward disability will improve. Did you know that the iPhone, it's actually a technology of choice among blind people these days, I hear. Part of the reason it's very convenient, but it's also, there's no stigma of that device. Everybody's using it. Everybody's using the same device. So that's why if everybody was using some kind of a wheelchair, then there would be no stigma in being in a wheelchair either. Dissemination, that's an important section of a proposal. You have to share your results, share your findings. So I happen to be the chair of the Web for All conference, and actually we're also changing positioning this year. It was called Web Accessibility Conference. We decided to redefine it, the new accessibility, addressing information barriers, because any one of us, people who are able-bodied, they find themselves in situations when they cannot use a phone, let's say while driving. There are many situational disabilities. So this conference would be a premier venue for publishing the research results. Then there are magazines, such as Accessibility magazine. It's consistently ranked top 50 in the world. And this is the leading magazine covering health, disability, human potential, and it covers revolutionary assistive technology as well. So this is more popular media for dissemination. Finally, the resources. Any proposal should specify, do we have the resources? Do we have what it takes to deliver? Actually, this country has the best resources in the world, I think. The state-of-the-art research labs, lots of angel and VC funding, small business innovating research grants from the government, and numerous innovators and entrepreneurs. And that brings us to the personnel. Do we have the right people to do this? Well, I think so. The U.S. has been the cradle of innovation. We have companies such as Apple, View Plus, AI Squared, CharmTech Labs, my company. We have Global Public Inclusive Infrastructure, the organization. All of these are trying to popularize assistive technology among the mainstream. And you will see live demonstrations of these companies today. So Apple, founded in 1976, it leads the universal accessible design. iPhone is the assistive technology of choice. There's so many accessibility features there for everybody. Magnification, voiceover screen reader, Siri, FaceTime, mono audio, color inversion, switch control, braille input-output, and many of these technologies could be used by anybody. I use magnification myself, even though I don't have a 20/20 vision, but it helps sometimes. AI Squared, founded in 1987, based in Manchester Center, Vermont, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it has a number of successful products. The Zoom Text product family, Image Reader, iLovey, Zoom Reader, Zoom Contact, Side Queues, and some of these products will be demonstrated today. View Plus Technologies, founded in 1996, based in Corvallis, Oregon. Its products include Tiger Braille printers that produce tactile embossed prints, IVO tactile audio system, audio graphing calculator, and now they also have the voice AI technology, which I will demonstrate later today. GPII, Global Public Inclusive Infrastructure, one-size-fits-all digital inclusion. It's basically a public cloud-based infrastructure. It lowers the cost, instantly changes ICT to match user needs, anywhere, anytime, any devices a person encounters. And CharmTech Labs, founded in 2010. It's based in Stony Brook, New York, funded by SBIR grants from NIDIR, NIDR, and NIH. And its product is CAPTI Suite. It's an early stage product. It has CAPTI Narrator and CAPTI Screen Reader. And now we can go to questions. Thank you for your attention.
Just as a housekeeping matter, let me make clear to those who might be tuned into the webcast, we did have a few hundred people tune in last time, and we encourage public participation. You can send your questions to the following email address, aiispeaker@fcc.gov, or with Twitter, you can use the hashtag AIISpeaker.
Yeah, I wanted to take the questions first.
Hi. Hi, I have a question. Thank you for your presentation, first of all. Data has shown that consumption of web content is rapidly transitioning from your traditional desktop to mobile devices, and it's forcing a lot of companies to rethink how they deliver their content over the internet. Has these initiatives taken advantage of the fact that these companies have to rethink content delivery to get a seat at the table to implement these innovations during the design phase and not trying to retrofit it after the fact?
Yes, definitely. Every new technology that is trying to be more accessible than the previous technology, but people are still not listening to content. So if you're developing a mobile app, you still have the same problems. You don't provide the alternative text for the buttons and images. You still have inaccessible technology. And there's a war going right now, probably a war, I would call it a war, between the web applications and the mobile apps. And right now the apps seem to be winning, but I think the applications are going to stay as well.
Hi, my name's Mike Snyder, and it's kind of a follow-up to that. On the mobile devices and multiple platforms, what are you hearing in terms of kind of responsive design in terms of accessibility as people are looking at that as a web design and mobile devices, and the government's doing the same thing, or it's kind of rapidly spreading. Is that taking accessibility into account as it should?
Whatever the government is doing, I think is taking accessibility into account. But I think the main problem with the web accessibility in apps is still the way we're providing accessibility is retrofitting as well. It's not usable. It's accessible. You can access the stuff. All of the buttons have labels. All of the images have labels. But it takes people with vision impairments significantly more time to do the stuff, and I guess with other disabilities too. I mean, I've seen people who have mobility impairments work with the device. Basically, they have a cursor that moves across the screen, and it just moves in one direction. And when it gets to the icon that you would like to activate, then you press a button. And you can also reverse the movement of the cursor. Is going to go in the other direction, and that's all you can do. Try typing like that. So I think the technology needs to develop further. We need more types of interaction interfaces, using different modalities, using the touch, using the eyes.
Hi, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. So I just, basically, I guess it's sort of a challenge to what you said in your presentation. You said that the field should perhaps change its positioning and maybe, say to everyone, let's make assistive technology accessible for the general public. But I just wonder, if we took that position, wouldn't that just put put people with disabilities back where they were before, like people ignoring their needs for accessibility if we begin to think about, the general public instead. So wouldn't it be better if we instead say that the public should change their perception and to begin to see the benefits of assistive technologies?
I think what you're proposing is a lot harder, because that's what we've been trying to do. We've been trying to change the perspectives of the public. And they have other needs. They have other pressures. Even if they care, they will do the minimum amount required, and they'll feel good about that. Will people with disabilities be left behind? I don't think so, because there will be still assistive technology companies that are trying to address the needs of a niche market. It's just that some of those assistive technology companies would be displaced, so they'd have to find new business. Because if we align the needs of people with disabilities and the mainstream, then the technologies will be less inaccessible. It will be good for everybody. And again, there's a small step. Once you develop a technology that is universally accessible, if you make sighted people listen to web content, there will be a lot more pressure to make that content accessible. And there will be a very small step to make that content accessible to people with vision impairments.
Hi. Hello? Okay. Hi, I'm Greg Leiblock. I'm in the Disability Rights Office here. Thank you very much for your great presentation. Well, first of all, you may or may not know that the TTY was invented by a deaf individual. And it's interesting that you made the point and emphasized the role of assistive technology in promoting access. It doesn't necessarily have to be a competition between access technology and the mainstream. It's sort of a balance. You've educated folks regarding the accessibility problems with people the accessibility problems with interoperability of video presentations. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to the users of video, you have pointed out the various issues with FaceTime, but not with the interoperability among video presentation softwares like Skype and FaceTime, which are currently non-interoperable. So these are technologies offered in the mainstream. Various video providers must become interoperable and to take best advantage of those technologies. So industry themselves need to make their products interoperable.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And there are a number of talented people who understand accessibility in the major corporations like Google, Apple, and Microsoft. They're trying, but they're pushing from within. In terms of interoperability, I think that's the task for GPII. It would be great if they solve that. But I completely agree with you. It's not a competition. Should not be a competition between the assistive technology and the mainstream. They should be helping each other. And again, if we, on the one hand, people who are working on mainstream, they should be making the technology universally accessible, and they're trying to do that, but they need more help from people who understand the assistive technology. If we can make the assistive technology usable by everybody, then a big mainstream corporation would get interested and acquire that technology, and then will incorporate it into its products.
Hi, my name is McLeese Stevens. Something that I've done a little bit of work just looking at the autistic spectrum, and learned myself that I learn better when I read a book. So I've finished more books in the last few years because of Mac programs read text-to-speech. And I was just thinking than I did before. And I was just thinking that this autistic spectrum also is, although it's not a distinct, just different types of thinking and different types of learning that are often shut out of the conversation because either they can't get through the reading or they can't whatever. I also think that's important too, that sometimes we don't see that side of this conversation, that not only does making this changing the positioning to an assertive positioning also enables different kinds of thinking and different kinds of solutions and different kinds of innovations that aren't that still aren't on the table all the time.
Yeah, I think so too. And there are, apart from autistic people, there are also a lot of people who have dyslexia. About 15% estimated in the United States. And all of us have disabilities. I don't think that there are people with disabilities and people without disabilities. There's just a continuum where basically we have different abilities and they're developed or available to us to different extent. So, I think I'm dyslexic a little bit too, even though I normally don't have a problem, but I occasionally swap numbers when I look at the numbers. So that's why I think the accessibility feature, it should be a feature in the mainstream technology. It shouldn't be a separate device, because a separate device, separate technology, a screen reader, it stigmatizes people who are using it. And if it's just a feature, you just adjust the size of the font. My fonts in the computer are bigger because my vision is not 20/20. And if it keeps degrading, I will keep increasing the font size, and I'll just eventually start listening to the content as well. I might actually start listening to content earlier. I already am listening to content, actually. After this question answering session is over, Jamal asked me to demonstrate the CAPTI technology, so I use that a lot these days.
I'm Bob Aldrich. I work at Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Really excellent presentation. I was wondering if you could say anything about the web and the status of standards for web pages or consensus for how web pages are designed, because it just strikes me that some of the issues you're raising have to do with the fact that everybody designs a web page the way they want to, and that to make that accessible becomes more difficult when every web page is designed differently. Is there any movement towards more uniform web page design, or is that an issue?
I never heard of I heard about people trying to do that, but I have not heard about that being adopted widely. People will keep designing web pages in whichever way they want. The guidelines are actually in very good shape, especially with HTML5. But I think it's sort of an obsolete way of interaction. I think the technology is going to move more toward assistance. We just need a totally different approach, because the problem with screen reading websites is that you have a lot of content and you need to navigate in that content. And all you can do is either use voice commands, which may not be very convenient for navigation, or people use shortcuts. You press the down button, up button to go between lines. You press certain shortcuts to go between elements of certain types, like headings, images, foreign fields. And you have to discover this stuff. And the problem with screen reading is that you don't know whether you are reading what you need to read before you hear it. So you listen for a little bit and then you skip. You listen a little bit and skip. And then in the process, you can also skip something that you needed. So imagine a different type of interaction where you could just tell the computer to do what you need to do. The web itself is a tool. It's a tool for information foraging. It's a tool for getting things done, making reservations, buying something, banking. So we should just change the way we interact with computers at all. You should tell the computer what you want it to do. And that's what we're trying to do as well with NIH funding.
We have one question that's come in over the web, so I'd just like to share that really quickly, and then we'll get to your question. This is from David Andrews from the state of Minnesota, and he says, as problematic as web accessibility is, consumer electronics, appliances, and the like are worse. What can we do in this area?
I think the same thing. It's my expertise in web accessibility. That's why I've been talking a lot about it. And consumer electronics, you saw the vending machine. That's a typical example. People are not really caring. They're looking for a shiny new solution. Again, the same thing. If you think about touch screens, there's right now a lot of people are trying to make them accessible to touch. But there are a lot of technological challenges. It's not just the fact that we don't want to do this. We would like to be able to feel stuff on a screen, but it's a difficult thing. So any kind of physical innovations, I think, are a lot harder than the programmatic innovations.
Hi. My name is Kelly Williams. I work in the television industry. I was really fascinated by two things that you said, and I had some thoughts. One, it seems that accessibility or an accessible technology is kind of different for everybody. Everybody needs what works correctly for them, just like everybody else. And not having the advantage to be sighted, to see difference. I really see your point about being able to get to something, and even if it's a physical device, and just do what you want to do. Turn your TV on and go to channel 12. It'd be nice to be able to do that. So I was thinking, you touched on cloud-based accessible technologies. And if you think about particularly, everything almost nowadays has a connection to the web. Do you see a future in cloud-based technologies? Because what's accessible for me might be different for what's accessible for you. And if I found something that works, I'll use the term screen reader, but it has to be better than a screen reader. It needs to be an interface that's designed for a deaf person or designed for a blind person. That's a different interface than adapting something for a sighted person. I mean, some of this is conjecture on my part, but it seems logical. Adapting technologies for someone who can hear and see doesn't really work in the long term. You have to design a solution for someone who's deaf or blind or even both. And I don't know what that is. But so I was thinking a cloud-based solution, because you also talked about the stigma of having an extra device or something. So in a world where everything is connected to the internet, is cloud-based solutions, or we use this term now for other things, of crowd-sourced, where someone creates something, it exists in a cloud, and an individual can find something that works for them. Do you see that as a future?
Yeah, but you actually touched a lot of things. I'll try not to forget that. The cloud-based, and this is a big trend these days. And if you think about web pages, they are cloud-based. And it's interesting how technology shifts. So first we had mainframes, which was pretty much like cloud-based, right? And then we moved to personal computers, and then we moved back to the mainframe. So I think it's going to keep going back and forth, because there are certain things that are more efficient or more private to do on a local device, and then there are certain things that you would do on the cloud. And about interfaces, you need to adapt the information. There's basically, we're all trying to access information this way or another. So you need to overcome the barriers, and we need to adapt the information for a particular need. And I think the GPII, again, is a perfect example of how you could solve that problem. So you're welcome to see the demo in the demo session.
Yeah, this is Greg Vanderheiden. I really would like to reinforce what you've been saying, and to also reinforce the idea that it goes beyond the web. We really in the past have been looking at this sort of search, read, choose, then read some more and choose, and read some more and choose, with large pages of lots of information, which is tuned to someone who has vision and can scan over large areas. And when you're blind, you're essentially looking through a soda straw, reading one word at a time. And if somebody would like to try browsing the web using a soda straw, and that's kind of what it's like using a screen reader, and very quickly you find that your biggest problem is you never know where to look, and you spend all your time, looking in the wrong place. This idea of agent that you've been talking about, I think that if we want to talk about accessibility in the future, we really should begin, one of the grand challenges is to look at the fact that in the future our interaction not only with the web but with our appliances in our house might look more like a dialogue, where you would sit down in front of your television and say what you want to have happen, or you would ask, what shows are on right now that have to do with this, or what shows are on right now that I've watched before, or that I liked before, or something like this. And it will be in a fairly short period of time able to present those, to tell you that. And this is a whole different way of interacting, and not just for vision, but cognitive disabilities. And for all of us at the end of the day, when we don't feel like spending all of our time trying to figure out how to go up and down through the menus. So could you talk a little bit more about what you see? I mean, this kind of a future where you have a servant, if you will, that you can talk to that will dialogue with you. Of course, the danger is that everything that you say and everything it knows, it will now share with whatever service is providing this free dialogue to you, so that they now know even more and more about how to target advertising to you. But aside from this very big downside, which everybody seems to not care about, and because they want the benefit, what do you see as being the future, and how long will we have to wait, do you think, before we're going to be seeing the ability to do this, which would be so great for cognitive and elders and low vision and blindness and physical disability, et cetera?
That's a very good question. Again, you touched a lot of different areas. And I think, yes, the assistant technology, when you have an agent, that's the way to go. That is the future. Because when we have a question, what do? We go on the web and look for something. But when we really have a question, we need an expert opinion. We will go seek out somebody who knows about that, who spent a lot of time doing research and reading. So we go to a person. So every time we want assistance, we ask somebody else to do this. If a blind person cannot access something in a web page, they ask for assistance from a coworker or a family member. And again, there's always this assistance going on. So if a computer could fulfill that role, that would be even better. So I think the assistant technology, the agent technology, is the way of the future. And as far as the privacy is concerned, that's a tricky thing. We are constantly giving up our privacy, and I think that every new generation is less and less careful about this, and they don't really care. So I guess that's going to be the trend. I developed some technology that helps extract the content, ignore the ads, and people came to me and said, "Well, what about the ads? What if we want to see the ads?" Yeah, you can see the ads. The problem is the ads are not that very relevant to what you need. And a lot of technology is actually being funded by the advertisement. That's why the technology is free. The developers need to maintain the company. They need to keep improving the technology. So they need the money. They're not charging you the money. So they need to charge either the content providers or they need to charge advertisers. So I understand that if I'm not willing to pay and I want to use the technology for free, I have to listen to the ads. But if I have to read and listen to the ads, they better be more relevant to what I need. So from that point of view, if the agents are going to become so smart that even advertisement is going to be very, very targeted, I don't mind that. I'd like to see advertisement that is relevant to me, that understands that I like to go to Caribbeans and it will show me good deals for the Caribbeans and not for something else, not to Hawaii, for example. It's too far away.
You spoke about the need for innovators to think about accessibility from the design stage, at the design stage. To what do you attribute the failure of innovators to think about accessibility? Is there an education and some of us are in the education outreach business here in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Is that part of the issue, or is it a cost issue that they're thinking of the population in a very narrow way, and therefore, the costs of including accessibility just isn't economical, or to what do you attribute that failure?
It's everything. Education is a big part of it, and I mentioned that we should be educating people, but that's only a small part of it. The cost and the time, and so there's a cost associated with the time as well. If you have the money, you can go to an expert or a bunch of experts who are going to help you design the technology in an accessible way. But the biggest challenge is the time, is the fact that you're so pressed for the time to deliver the minimum viable product to the market. And basically, you're going to spend a year developing one technology that is accessible to the major population, to the general public, and you would deliver it right away, and it's inaccessible, because if you wanted to make it accessible to everybody, you'd have to spend maybe another year, and it would be a lot more cost associated with that too. So even if people know how to do this, they cut corners. They think, well, we have stakeholders. They need to see profits.
So with a company like Apple, though, that you gave as an example, do they have a corporate mindset that's different than another company, or is it the size of Apple? Were they thinking about accessibility and from the outset of that company? That company wasn't always a huge, the huge corporate entity that it is now. So can you just comment on that?
Yeah, I never worked for Apple, but I hear good things about them. I have friends who work at Apple. It's about the mission of the company. It's in their DNA, so to say. In general, I would say that the large companies, the corporations, they have the hierarchy, the bureaucracy, and they're a lot slower to innovate. There's a lot more pressure on them than on small companies in terms of innovation and the time to market, because they're all of the breakthrough innovations, they come in small companies, most of them, other than innovations that require a lot of funding. And then when a small company comes up with innovation, usually a corporation acquires it, and that way it gets the innovation.
Hi, how are you doing? My name is Felicia Davis, and again, thank you for your presentation. I want to kind of focus on content management and actually the design aspect of web accessibility. And I kind of want to personalize it. In your opinion, how would you look at fcc.gov and actually think about what the next step would be as far as innovation or making our content more accessible, and how do you feel it is as is?
I think FCC has done a very good job at making it accessible. But again, it's accessible within the frame of the current technology. People should be coming to FCC website, and they should interact again with FCC as with an agent. They should either come with a particular goal, or they should talk to an agent. When you call somebody, you call your bank and you ask them what kind of services are available for me. And then there's somebody on the other end telling you, okay, you can do this, this, and this. And if they even know something about you, again, it's privacy issue. But if they can access to some private information about you, they could personalize this. And there's privacy that not a person looking at it, but rather a machine. And you can argue that it's still private because there'll be a billion of people accessing technology. This basically security by obscurity. There's too much information. But if somebody wants to dig deep and learn something more about you, then there's a problem. But again, I think the website is in very good shape.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Actually, I was working with different kinds of devices, such as iDevices, Android, and Windows, and some other types. But unfortunately, I was not in a position to see 100% accessibility in a lot of cases. So I am wondering, I would like to get your opinion. Is there any possibility to keep any mandatory to put a special rule, like an international protocol or something like that? If we develop anything, there should be any universal accessibility with all products. then our community will be totally benefited. Sir, do you have what is your opinion about that, sir, to setting up things?
Could you repeat the last part, please? I missed it.
Pardon, sir?
Could you repeat the last part of your question? I missed
last
it.
part.
I'm
thinking about setting up an international prototype, like if any companies or vendors create their own products or something like that. Accessibility should be mandatory or something. So is there any rules already available, or do you have any suggestion for that?
It's a difficult question. Countries, people within one country cannot agree on things. People within one company cannot agree on things. And if trying to agree on something like CRPD, for example, people wouldn't ratify it, or in some cases they would not ratify it like United States, but at the same time do good things for accessibility and be one of the most accessible countries at the same time, and other countries ratifying it and not doing anything. So I don't know. I think that the approach when you mandate something, when you regulate, is never the right approach. You should find a way to encourage people to make stuff accessible. Again, in my presentation, I was saying that if we can make the technology, if we make the mainstream use the assistive technology, then there will be other kind of pressures to make the content accessible. So not by way of mandating and regulations, which is still important. That would be important because you cannot use my approach for everything. I think there will be some limitations. But people need to want to make content accessible for other reasons. And I think the only really working reason is the market pressures, is the fact that the majority of people need the content to be accessible. That's when everybody's going to pay attention. Before that, it's either regulations, and the regulations you have the usability versus accessibility issue. People will do the least amount required, and then you have lots of guidelines, and people will find a way to mess them up even if they honestly try to follow the guidelines.
Two things. One was a question, an answer a little bit about Apple. I worked with Apple starting in 1985, and it's a complicated story, as most of these things are. Apple actually began, and we put the first accessibility features in 1986. We did them on the Mac and on GS and even on the 2E. And this was before there was regulation, so they were actually the first ones to put them in. Mm-hmm. Then later, when we went to OS 10, they all completely disappeared for a while. And then they came back. The fact that there was no screen reader later, because that company went out of business, caused Apple to have to begin thinking about how to make their own or not have one. And that got them kind of into it. And then it was a combination of, and this had to do with regulation having an impact. So in the beginning they did it before, but then it lost, and then regulation helped to get it back in, caused them to start building their own screen reader. And then other kind of routes. We can do this kind of things took off. The iPhone came out, and it scared the Jesus out of everybody who was blind, because the most popular phone in the world was a blank piece of glass, and it was completely unusable. But then they turned that around and turned it into being sort of like a model. But even today, the iPhone and things like this are very accessible for people who can use it, but you can't put AT on them, adaptive AT. So if what they have it built in works for you, it's just nirvana. But if it doesn't work for you, you can't buy another version to put on there. So it's a complicated situation, but it is really amazing to see what can be done. And a lot of that, the feedback they got early on from the community for what they were doing, I think really helped to spur on them to do more and more. So positive reinforcement for what's done. I would like to really emphasize the vision that you see won't happen by yelling at them for what they haven't done as much as it happens by reinforcing them for what they have done. So I think part of a key part of seeing your vision is people remembering that part. And then finally, as you mentioned before, the GPII, which we'll be showing in the room after lunch, is really built all around a collaborative working with industry and consumers and stuff, and how to make it so that accessibility just is naturally into the different kinds of things. So a large part of its purpose is to facilitate this vision that you're talking about.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and thank you very much for the insight in Apple. I'd like to hear more about that, maybe in a private conversation. We have to encourage people by positive reinforcement. So there should still be regulations, still be guidelines. We should still educate people about accessibility. There are many pieces to this puzzle, but again, there will be companies like Apple. They have resources, so if they have a vision, they want to do this, they will do it. Smaller companies will develop a very innovative technology that would be, again, targeted at the mainstream, and they will not have the resources, not the time to make it accessible in the beginning. And Apple, again, did that with the iPhone. They came up with a revolutionary product, but it wasn't accessible. What we do is we're retrofitting. We come up with a product and we look for assistive technology to fix it. So I think if we found a way for all of us to use different modalities like sight, hearing, touch, even smell, use technology. You're listening, you're looking at some article and it smells. I think it would benefit, all of us will benefit from the technology if we thought about people using the technology, using different modalities. If we had people listening to stuff, there would be probably less problems with the screen reading. If our technology was like an agent, I think you asked a question I didn't answer. Forgot about how long we're going to wait until the technology becomes agents, when we have the assistants that would help us, electronic assistants. It's going to take a while. It's very difficult. It's easy to make predictions, but any complicated technology takes years to develop, and then you can lose focus while you're developing it. It's a struggle, even developing a small product. I thought research was difficult. Coming up with ideas was difficult, but it turns out there's a lot of people come up with ideas. The execution of the idea is even harder. And you know that. Now I know that too.
I have another question. You had mentioned during your presentation, pointing to statistics showing that the aging population will continue to become a larger segment of the general population. And also in light of the fact that people are eschewing purchasing goods from brick and mortar stores and moving towards online purchases, do you believe that major retail players will inevitably push towards universal accessibility because they want to tap into this market? Amazon, for instance, they developed that one-click purchase feature because they have studies showing that the faster that you can add something to your cart and make the purchase, the more purchases they can have in their system. So if somebody has a disability and it's taking them 10 to 15 minutes using the traditional model to make a similar purchase, it's in Amazon's best interest to develop this technology to make the purchasing process easier and quicker.
Yeah, and that 10-15 minutes was with one-click purchase as well. If a certain population that has a special need is increasing, that would be a positive force, a market force, to address the needs of the population. So if, God forbid, everybody suddenly loses sight, then the technology is going to be extremely accessible to everybody. With the aging population too, if it's becoming a bigger market, the providers of the technology, the stores that would be more interested in making everything accessible. And I think the stores are going to move more and more online. There was these virtual worlds, so experimentation with them. I think that's also the way of the future. They just didn't have the right technology. You know, technology goes through iterations. People come up with some interesting technology, but it's before its time, and it's just not quite there. Like the touch screens, Apple made it really, really usable, but it wasn't the first touch screen. So I think that we're going to see virtual worlds coming back eventually again, but this time with some kind of tactile feedback with augmented reality, when you could actually, instead of going to a store, you were going into a virtual store and you can see the shelves and you can touch things. It's one of the problems with buying things online. Sometimes I want to go to the store and touch the thing first, see that I like it before I can commit to buying it.
Hi, I'm Deborah Kaplan, and I came late, and so I'm trying to catch up to some extent. But to the extent that accessibility is concerned with issues around interfaces, is what you're saying, or what I'm getting from the discussion, and tell me if I'm right, is to some extent, so most of accessibility has been about catching up. We have people who don't have disabilities who are designing interfaces for themselves. And accessibility has been an after-the-fact sort of exercise where we then figure out how do we change what you guys have designed so that some people who are not exactly like you can use it. What your remarks make me think is that we really don't have much research into if deaf people or blind people were designing an interface for themselves, how would they want it to work? We don't really know that very well. Or maybe, Greg, maybe we do, and I don't know about any research like that, but that kind of research would be extremely important to do what you're talking about, I would think, to capture benefits that might then be useful for everybody. Because right now, making just the whole idea of what accessibility is, we don't know to what extent our accessibility solutions really work for the people they're intended for, because what we're doing is taking a solution that wasn't meant for them and modifying that so that it sort of works. And so it just occurs to me that it would be very interesting to really find out what real accessibility would be to give people, what would be necessary to give people really equivalent functionality, and start from there.
Yeah, that is a very good point, and there is research. There's not as much research coming out of people with disabilities because there are fewer of them, so there are fewer of them in research. But researchers who don't have a particular disability, like myself, we do work a lot with people with disabilities, and we have focus groups, and we do user studies, and we're trying to understand. We're blindfolding ourselves for a while, trying to understand how it feels to use the technology. So we're getting a lot of insight, and there's a lot of publications on this as well. And there's a lot of innovation that comes out that is specifically targeted at a particular group with particular needs. There's innovation that is just for that as well. But I think that the problem is that there are fewer resources to develop that kind of technology. And it takes a long. But for example, we have websites that the people who are sighted can easily browse, and sighted people are not listening to the web, so the screen readers have to do a lot to make that content, that is existing content, accessible to people with vision impairments. If we taught sighted people to listen to the web, showed them a usable way, that way is probably not going to be usable to people with vision impairments. They have more specific needs, but the amount of effort we'd have to put is going to be much less than. So we still need to do research and understand the specific needs of every group of disabilities, but it'll be less effort. That's why I think if we push the technology, the assistive technology, make it accessible to people without disabilities, it will be easier to make it then again accessible, even if it loses focus. And that's typically what happens in history, because it's the mainstream that they're trying to address the majority of population, get the most money for it. And if you develop successful technology, let's say our assistive technology becomes mainstream and somebody buys us out, it will eventually stop. They will stop caring about people with disabilities. They won't care about it as much as we do. They'll have other pressures. But it will be a smaller step for the assistive technology companies, even if they have to retrofit.
I think that's it for our Q&A.
Do we have time for a demo?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, it's going to be a short demo.
Okay, yeah.
So it's a very simple technology. Let me reconnect my phone. So what we have here is an iPhone app. I'm going to turn on VoiceOver so it's accessible for everybody. Here's my cable.
Playlist heading.
There we go. So the app was motivated by the fact that there's just too much information out there and we don't have the time to read it right away. And my research has been in non-visual access to information, helping people with vision impairments. So we set out to develop a screen reader that would be smarter than what's available right now, and we're still doing that as well. We're also thinking of how to take the technology to the mainstream, how to make it accessible to everybody. And for that, you need to find a need that everybody has. And the fact that we like to multitask, and there's not enough time to consume information. I receive a lot of. I could listen to the radio. There's audio way of consuming information. I can listen to podcasts, but that's something that somebody else is pushing to me. Some information I don't necessarily need. And there's a lot of stuff that I need to read, such as people send me emails, people send me links to very relevant articles. I see tweets with very relevant technology. So I need to read that stuff, but I don't have the time. But I do have a lot of time in the car. I like to walk. I go to the gym and exercise, and I try to become more productive. And I sit in front of the computer the entire day, and for me to spend an extra hour reading that stuff is just pain. So I would much rather listen to it. So here I have an app that has a playlist, and this is, I think, the simplest way to interact with information. Other than the actual assistance, but we have to consider the current state of technology.
Screen dimmed. Welcome to CAPTI. Unread. My Brush with Andy. Ability Magazine. Update 3 high iPhone price spooks investors.
Some stuff
Apple
that I was
shares
reading
drop.
on the
Pause.
plane.
Google Plus enhancements to provide authors easier content attribution.
So these are just different items in my playlist. It's completely accessible with VoiceOver, and I added these articles from the web. I'll show you how to do that a little later. So now if I just double tap some track.
My Brush with Andy.
Ability Magazine. Lack of artistic talent should not be a burden. I have absolutely no artistic talent, but since I don't attempt to create
Pause.
art,
Button.
I feel quite unburdened.
Previous track.
However,
Next track.
I do
Button.
have opinions about those people
Update
who
3.
claim to be artists and produce
Slower selected.
mediocre work
Button.
for public
Normal.
consumption. I must state my prejudices about what some refer to as modern art.
So I can go fast to slower, control the playback, and when I extract the content, I put it in my playlist. It's just the main content of article. You don't have to read all the links. It's smart enough to find the main information in articles. So I'm going to go
Menu.
to the browser.
Play browser. Demonstrate pages 3. Page HTTP. Select
website.
tab. Button. Page 2 of 3. Select tab. Button.
Here's the Ability
Capti.
magazine. I'm going to pull a few articles from here.
Announces new regulations to improve disability and veterans employment.
So right now, getting the articles is still a little tough. This is an early stage technology. We're trying to simplify the entire process. Automation, I think, is a big thing. All the processes should be automated, make it very easy to add stuff. So I'm going to double tap a link.
Alert. Announces add to playlist button.
Add this to playlist.
Announces an invitation from FEMA to join the National Preparedness. An invitation from add to playlist button.
Add this article to playlist.
Vice President, page
I don't
206.
even need to open web pages.
White House highlights champions of change. Link.
You see the font is pretty small. I can't really see it, but I see there's an article. I can see the title of the article. Again, double tap and hold.
Alert. White House add to playlist button.
To playlist, and I'm going to return to the playlist.
Menu button. Playlist. Apple downgraded to neutral at Merrill Lynch. Rose 2 to 8 of 8.
Here I already have these articles loaded. They loaded so fast. 4G works really fast here.
Announces new regulations to improve disability.
Dahl announces new regulations to improve disability and veterans employment.
I can put the phone in
Vice
my pocket.
President Biden announced 2 new rules that represent a historic advance for veterans and individuals with disabilities. By strengthening...
Pause.
Yeah, I can just put the phone in my pocket and listen to the stuff as I'm driving, as I'm exercising, walking around, and it would read to me. And if I have the headphones, Apple headphones with a clicker on them, with the volume control, I can go to the next previous track. I don't even need to take the phone out. So I'm often on a treadmill listening to the latest news, latest technology news. And this is just the beginning. This app has, I cannot disclose all of the innovations we're going to put in here, but there's a lot of future here, I think, and this is one of the ways we can teach the general public to listen to content. And this was developed with support from NIDER. I think that'll be it for this demo, and thank you very much for coming here and being a very attentive audience. I enjoyed the questions a lot. It was the most questions I've ever had.
Have a few housekeeping items really quickly. First of all, Dr. Borodin, thank you very much for coming and being here. We appreciate it very much. We appreciate also the work that you're doing in accessibility. It makes a difference to a lot of people around the world, so thank you very much. I'd also like to thank our in-person audience for being here and our web audience for participating today. None of today's events could have happened without the foresight and the hard work of our A&I Initiative team and our Consumer Affairs and Outreach Division team. I would name each person individually, but that has bitten me in the past because I tend to forget somebody. So I will just thank them as a team and let them know how much I appreciate their hard work. And I think I speak on behalf of our Associate Bureau Chief, Roger Goldblatt, and our Bureau Chief, Chris Monteith. I'm sure they would echo those sentiments. Let me also remind those of you who are attending in person that immediately following the lunch hour, from 1 o'clock until 3 o'clock, we will have 4 tech demos in the Technology Experience Center, and that is just right up the staircase. Go out the door, turn to the right, and go up the stairs. There is also an elevator that is accessible we can help you with if we need to. Please join us for those to experience some of the exciting advancements that are being made in the accessibility arena. And thank you again for being here. Stay tuned to fcc.gov for more to come from the A&I Initiative. Thanks again, and have a great day.